The final purpose for reflectors will be for adding light to a background. If the background is too dark or is lacking definition, the solution is to send light to it. Because we were in a dark barn, sun bouncing off of the silver side of a fuzzy flector was plenty bright to light the wall. As you can see, the wall behind him was too dark. Reflecting sunlight onto that wall brings the density up so that it's in the same key or tonal range as the subject. That dark and flat shed in the background needed some attention. So I used the mirror side of two fuzzy flectors, although I could have used one and separated the panels, to reflect sunlight back to that shed wall. Because I wasn't a high volume senior shooter, there were some techniques that I just didn't do very often. Like, for example, this guy was from 1999, and I didn't need to light a barn wall again until the previous example in 2012. So it helps to be able to recall things when you need them. That's why this program has so many different tips and techniques. You never know what you'll encounter shooting on location. You can see here that the background looks too flat. So sometimes we can move the camera or the subject to an area that gives us a nice vignette and depth in the background. When we don't have that natural vignetted background, we can light up the area behind the subject with a reflector to create the look of a natural vignette. You can light the background in a variety of ways, but a reflector is the easiest if we have some sunlight nearby to reflect. On a sunny day, it's a really easy device to use if the background is relatively small and close. One of the benefits of any reflector is that you can see what it's doing. You can see if it's aimed right and if it's the right intensity. Here's another example where the subject was too bright in comparison to the trees that were behind her. So I had to use two reflectors to get that background light enough. You can see the problem here with that dark background and her light top. Those keys don't work very well together. Lighting up those trees and bushes corrected the key mismatch. But one other thing to remember is that when we light that area with a sharp light source, and because of the way lenses handle out of focus highlights, we end up with a crisp look to that background. So if you don't want that, I'd recommend opening up a stop on your lens for a better bokeh on the background. In this case, I didn't do that, so I blurred it in Photoshop, which is not the ideal way. This is the place where we'll be shooting. The block wall is an acceptable background to coordinate with the shirt that the fellow will be wearing. Because he was in shade, I lit him with a reflector just to my right. But using a reflector on him made the background wall go too dark. So the answer was to light the wall. I did that by placing a reflector close to the wall to skim the light along it to show the wall's texture. This is the image with just the reflector on him, and with the addition of the background reflector to better blend with that stone background. The stuff behind this guy is the byproduct of a coal burning process. It has a good texture, but the flat light on it didn't show the texture as well as I'd like. and also it didn't match the lighting on him. So I added light skimming across it to define the shape a bit better. I caught the last rays of a setting sun to lighten up and define the shape of that coal. Because she's out closer to the light, she's brighter than the wall behind her. So I needed to lighten up the wall. With a reflector, it's easy to catch that splotchy sunlight and reflect it back to the wall. As I've mentioned before, a reflector is a real-time device, so you can see the results as you're doing it, as opposed to a flash where you really can't see it until you make the exposure. In the next series, I'll use reflectors to overpower the blue skylight and the green light bouncing off of the grass on the subject, and then a second fuzzy reflector in the distance to reflect sunlight to the target. I started with this. Notice the flat, off-color skin tones. So I added reflectors to light him better. But you can see that by adding light to the subject, the background appears darker. Adding a reflector to light the target restores its importance as a secondary subject. And here's the pullback shot showing the reflector placements. One more look at the before and after. This background is darker than I'd like. I didn't have any lighting tools with me, so how can we fix it? In cases like that, I'll use Photoshop. I use the quick selection tool, then refine edge or select and mask to make a separate layer of just the background, then lighten the background separately. Let's put this all together for a progression of light correction on one image. This pullback view shows all the reflectors in place. The one just to the left of the subject placement arrow is the main white reflector. The mirror reflector to the far left is sending background sunlight to the farm implement that'll be behind her. The tall silver reflector behind the tree to the right sends edge or accent light to the subject. There's also a gobo on a light stand that's blocking stray sunlight that was filtering through the evergreen tree on the right. This first before image shows a lack of light direction and the blue skin tones that come from the blue sky. So I reflected sunlight off of the white panel of a fuzzy reflector to establish a soft main light. But adding that light to the subject means that the background will appear darker. So then I bounced sunlight into the background with the mirror surface of another fuzzy reflector. If you don't want to build two fuzzy reflectors, remember, you can separate the panels of one fuzzy reflector for this dual purpose. The final touch was to add a separation light where her hair blended into the background. And one more look at where we started and where we ended up. Forgive my poor drawing abilities, but this is an overhead view drawing of all of those lighting devices.